Welcome to Never Again is Now, a podcast about anti-Semitism. In this episode, we will discuss more of the contemporary anti-Semitism showcased in the recent Never Again episode of the popular CBS series, The Equalizer. I am Evelyn Marcus, and in addition to being a psychologist, I'm featured in the documentary about anti-Semitism, Never Again is Now. I am a daughter of Holocaust survivors. In 2006, I emigrated to the United States because of the rising anti-Semitism in Europe.
I am Phyllis Zimbler Miller, the founder of the free nonfiction Holocaust theater project, thinedgeofthewedge.com. I grew up in the Midwestern town of Elgin, Illinois. It was not a Holocaust community. Our parents and grandparents had come at the turn of the 20th century to escape the Tsar and other pogroms. And yet, in September 1970, my U.S. Army officer husband and I were stationed in Munich, Germany, only 25 years after the end of World War II and the Holocaust, and this changed our lives forever.
Writer Adam Glass is an executive producer and co-showrunner of the CBS series The Equalizer, and the writer of the show's Never Again episode that aired on March 2023. He also writes graphic novels for Marvel Comics and DC Comics. Adam, welcome to our show. We're happy to have you on.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you, Evelyn, and thank you, Phyllis. And Phyllis, you and I, our people came from the same shtetls, you know.
Really?
Yeah, my family was from Belarus.
Well, Latvia and Odessa.
Yeah, I
Tiraspol.
I had a great grandmother who was from Odessa, and I did not know that till everything started with the war in Ukraine, and my aunt brought it. But it was all they called it the Pale of Settlement, right?
Exactly, the Pale of Settlement.
Mm.
Exactly. For those listeners who don't know, there was a time when the Jews were restricted to a very specific area of that changing borderland between Russia and Poland and everything else. Anyway, let's get to modern times. As you know, as many of our listeners know, we recently spoke to Adam Goldberg about his role in this episode. But could you tell us, just for those people who haven't seen the episode, just a really quick outline of what actually you wrote, and then we'll get into it.
Sure. I mean, The Equalizer, it starts with an unfortunate, all common crime, a group of masked men. They, sort of graffitied some anti-Semitic rhetoric on a Jewish deli in Midwood, Brooklyn, which has a beautiful mural, which was inspired by anybody who knows Cantor's here in Los Angeles, has those beautiful Jewish murals up. And an employee tries to stop them, and they're hurt in the process. And the owner's daughter comes to our team for help. And it turns out Harry, who's played by Adam Goldberg, is from the Midwood neighborhood. And in the show, he's always identified with being Armenian, but what we reveal is that he's also half Jewish, that his mother's Jewish. And it's an episode that I think does a couple of things really well. It explores not only the hate that we as Jews deal with daily, but also Harry discovering something about his mother that he didn't know, which in the process also reconnects him with his Jewish roots.
Yeah, I love the when he lights the yard-side candle at the end of the episode. Okay, I'll try not to cry. Having just lit yard-side candles for my parents, for Yisker, for Shabu. Okay, so now that we have the framework, tell us how that came to be. I mean, it's so unusual for a TV series to deal with a fiction. They deal with lots of fictional news, but to deal with anti-Semitism is very unusual.
Well, we deal with a lot of subjects. We have a really great, sort of premise and show that allows us to sort of dive into some of the social things that are happening, especially in our country and being in New York City and all that stuff. So, we've dealt with a lot of different subjects. We've dealt with, drugs. We've dealt with, a lot of women, abuse issues, and we've dealt, we've tackled a lot of things, migrants and all that stuff. So as we know, unfortunately, there's so much Semitic hate happening in the world, and we're seeing it in the news constantly. So being Jewish, this was a subject that was important to me, and I was really surprised. Also in New York, I grew up in New York, grew up in the Bronx, in a place called Pelham Parkway in Co-op City. And I was shocked that it was happening in New York City. It's always been such a home for us Jews, and it was such a surprise. And also, I read a lot of, Barry Weiss and David, what is it, Baddiel, and someone else who also, by the way, I think doesn't ever get enough credit for all of the great writing he does up against anti-Semitism, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And I realized, like them as a writer, I felt like I had a platform which I could use to fight this. So I started discussing this with another writer on our show, Aura Yashar, and her family came to America from Iran in 1979. So I love the idea of Aura being a woman and also having sort of a different Jewish experience. And we decided to sort of come together and write this episode together.
That's
And
great.
The network didn't say, oh, no, you can't tackle that subject.
No, it's really interesting. They were very supportive. Both NBC and CBS was very supportive. And, I always joke, I've been doing this for over 30 years. And I'm like, when everybody's like, the business is just all Jews, I'm like, my manager's not a Jew. My lawyer's not a Jew. Like my accountant's not a Jew. Like most of my executives aren't Jewish. So this wasn't like something where you told it and everybody on the phone, on the Zoom calls were going, yeah, we have to tell the story. Actually, everyone's like, yes, we have to tell the story because it's important. But I think Aura and I were the only Jews on the phone when we were having these conversations. So, again, trying to get away from, I think, some of the things that we say about Hollywood that might not necessarily be true anymore, especially. So yeah, no, they were incredibly supportive, all that stuff. And, we tackled it in a way that I think also was a unified way for everyone to sort of tap into the story in a way that they can understand. And, I even remember, talking to everybody, about it. And, we had such support. Joe Wilson, who is my co-showrunner, was like, we have to tell this story. He's like, he's, one of the greatest things he said was how much he learned from this episode about Jews and Judaism and not understanding, the whole experience, which was our hope for it. And, Queen Latifah was so supportive, and, Lorraine Toussaint was so important, and Adam Goldberg was so supportive. Everybody in the whole cast was like, yeah, this is happening right now. We're seeing in the news every day. We have to get on this.
It's so great to hear, Adam, how you used your professional platform to speak up against anti-Semitism. Our show is all about people speaking and encouraging people to speak up against anti-Semitism in whatever way they can. And you used your professional platform and thankfully had the support of your team and your network to do so. So you reached a lot of people with this episode, that's a big thing. We're very grateful to you and your team and your network for doing this.
And really quick, it's something that, Evelyn, that I've done all my career. It just also, what's the size of the platform? I remember I wrote a graphic novel called Brick, and it was about a boy growing up in a Jewish neighborhood in Yonkers. And, and just like this story, and we can get into it, I can't help but put my own experience into these stories and sort of how I grew up. I like to say the old world dies with me, in my generation. We still, I'm 54, we still all had family members from the old world. We knew Holocaust survivors. Yiddish was spoken in our home. And even though religiously, I like to say I'm a young Kippur Jew, I'm certainly Jewish, and I'll use the initials AF. And if you don't know what that means,
no.
I don't want to say it because it's a curse word. I'm Jewish. Let's just say I'm Jewish as hell.
Okay.
But I wrote this story I'll never forget called Brick, and it was about a boy who didn't have a dad, but was very close to his Jewish Holocaust surviving grandfather. And when he dies, he left the boy the secrets of how to make a golem. And he makes one, and it's the story's so close and personal to me. And I remember it came out and no one read it. And I was so heartbroken. I was like, I tried to get Jewish groups to support it, and I tried to get Jewish newspapers to write about it, and nobody wrote about it. I was like, oh my God, I'm writing a story for our people. And I feel like I've always tried to sort of do little things throughout my career. If I think back to it, even if it's little hints, if a character, I did a show called Supernatural that was really popular, and we buried one of the people in the show who passed away, who we wouldn't have thought of was Jewish, but I kept sure there was a Star of David on his tombstone, like, so I've always been trying to do this. And I think, to your point, it also depends on the platform you are. And I was very fortunate that a show that before this episode was so popular and so big and was already dealing with so many of these social issues that it really was able to sort of all come together and come out and do this. So I'm as thankful. I mean, as much as I've been trying to do it, to your point, really thank you for the network and the show and all the support we had from everybody for it.
That's great. That's great. So you said what inspired you most was what you saw around you in the New York area, which has always been safe for the Jews as long as you live, and now certainly turns into a less safe place for Jews. Is there also something in your personal backgrounds, your family background maybe, that played a role in wanting to make this episode?
Yeah, as I said earlier, I was raised by my bubby and my mom. I didn't have a dad, and I like to say I was raised also by Hannah and her sisters. I had, bunch of crazy Jewish aunts, but that's sort of like, as my wife likes to say, I came well trained to our 24-year marriage. So, I grew up in a neighborhood that was changing tremendously. I think the migration that happened for a lot of Jews, the working class Jews, the blue collar Jews, my family was in the schmata business. And, when I say they were in the schmata business, again, sort of, let's take away some stereotypes. We were not rich Jews. We were pretty poor Jews, and my grandmother, hemmed stuff and, did those things. And my grandfather made curtains and, they cut out a living. But I think what happened in the 70s and 80s is this great migration started to happen and people started to move out of the inner cities into Long Island, Queens. We did not. So, I grew up in a much more diverse world than my family did. I went to school, in the Bronx. And, by the time I was growing up, I was the minority, especially of Jews. And, I was, and a lot of what you see in the show, with Harry is a lot of my experience, my bubby would say to me stuff like, you're white until they know you're Jewish and hide your Star of David. And I, like Harry, I believe this wouldn't be my experience. I really felt like those were just her fears being pushed onto me. I was a hip hop kid, I believed in the old Bob Marley saying of one love. I mean, in my heart, I still believe that. But, as like most people, I think everyone thinks their generation is going to change the world. And you get older and realize you moved at the same inch as the generation before you. And that some of the things you're being told actually are true and there are reasons they're true. So this was my chance to add to that conversation. And I have Jewish kids. And now I'm saying the same things to my kids that my bubby said to me. And that both bothers me. Like my daughter, especially super proud of her Jewish heritage, wears her Star of David everywhere. And there were nights she's going out in the city and I'm living in New York because I'm shooting the show and I'm going, maybe, like I didn't say it, but in my mind, I'm like, maybe you should tuck that away. I don't want you to have the problems. Now I wear my Star of David proudly, but I'm also a big guy, like people aren't going to, walk up and they're going to think twice, but it worries me. It scares me that these same issues, that we have historically had forever are still so prevalent, in our society. So, again, I think a lot of it comes, this is a love letter to the future and the past, really, like I tell my kids all this time, so blessed that my family came here, that came to America and gave us this opportunity. Like, what would my life have been? I mean, I can't believe it. And also, like I said earlier, seeing the end of that old world, and sort of the ends of it. Like, I mean, it's little stuff, but like out here in LA, you go to a deli and you can't get kasha vanishes anymore. You can't get you're starting to see things die off and you're starting to see them disappear and become even more gentrified. And you start to, all those things you understand, like, again, like all these things that were being told to me as a kid, I am now starting to see very clearly as I've grown older and I'm watching my children grow up. So it's a long way of saying all those things, Evelyn, inspired me to get part of this conversation, throw my hat in the ring and not be complacent and not sit back and not, I have to say something. I have to do something.
Right. Adam, there are various types of anti-Semitism in the world, also in the United States these days. It can come from the right, it can come from the left, it can come from another religion. What you chose the neo-Nazi type of contemporary anti-Semitism to, as for the plot of the show, of the episode. What made you choose that type of anti-Semitism?
Well, you said it earlier, Evelyn, it's like Israel's such a hot topic, right? And I so support, a Jewish state, but I don't think in an hour we could tackle, all the political issues and the relationships and all that stuff. And I always say this, Jews were not a monolith, the Jewish people. And, yeah, really important. And also the idea that, we're tied to the politics of a country, fair or not, I say, what other group of people have to do this or live or serve, do people walk up to, Australians if their country does something bad and say to them, and again, America has things I don't necessarily agree with politically, but I still am proud to be an American. So Israel's such a hot topic. And I just didn't feel like we could sort of deal with that. And I thought it also opened cans of worms that got away from sort of typical anti-Semitism and started to become other issues that people want to put on it, colonialism and and all that stuff. So I was like, can't be about Israel, right? And then, I think you just hit on this, we have other religious, groups and other culturally racial relationships that are also hot buttons, but these are also reflected in history and time periods. And I believe hate groups want to divide and conquer marginalized groups. I think we have more in common with our Black and Spanish and Asian brothers and sisters than we don't. Like, it's all about food, it's all about family, it's about fighting hate. And this is all something I think that's woven into the fabric of all our culture. So again, really big subject to not be able to tackle on our TV. But like I think Charlottesville taught us is, and when you saw that, was there's a new face of hate, and it's not the skinheads with the swastikas anymore. It's the person working at Walmart. It's the teacher in New Jersey, and that it's becoming so accepted and normalized that people don't feel like they have to hide it anymore. That scares the crap out of me. So that was the subject and what I wanted to tackle.
See, and also as you place it in a broader frame of hate, it also becomes more relevant to, to more people than only Jewish audiences, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. I mean,
yeah.
Say it in there, Dante says hate's everyone's problem, because it is. It's like, if we learned anything from the past, it's, they'll come for us and then they're going to come for you.
Exactly.
And it's like, so we got to help each other. And it really, again, sort of drives me a little nuts that we've become so divided in this nation for many reasons, mostly politics and religion and all those things. But it's like, again, like we have so much in common. We have such a rich history together. If you look at sort of us and other marginalized groups in this country, I think, Jews can relate to everybody. We relate to everything. We know what it is to be gay and be in the closet. We know what it is, to not be able to be in except in the country clubs. We know what it is to, like, you just go on and on and on. And I think because, as a group, we've been pretty successful, in so many things that are, looked upon in our society as like, money and Hollywood and all this stuff. We're always looked at as like, oh, why are you guys crying? Why are you upset? It's, it's all worked out so well for you. But again, like, I grew up on welfare, like I like to tell people all the time, I'll never forget someone from high school I saw at my high school reunion. And they said, well, of course you made it in Hollywood. You're Jewish. And I said, I didn't know anybody. They're like, oh, come on. You didn't know anyone. I'm like, no, I didn't know a soul. And also, this gets into sort of like, I like to say, our own mishmagosh, right? We as a people, we can't, there's a joke in there I put, he says, we can't even agree on lunch. It's like, it's true. I mean, I felt when I got into Hollywood, and this is my own, stuff I carry, most of the kids I met my age in the profession or the business, or someone even a few years older than me, the first thing they'd say to me is, what camp did you go to? And I didn't go to camp. We didn't have money to send me to a Jewish camp. You know, like that just wasn't the thing. What college did you go to? I went to Brooklyn College. I'm a city university kid. So there was this instant disconnect. And I felt like for a lot of, especially the men, I reminded them more of their grandfather's generation. I was the pull yourself up by your bootstraps guy. And that made them feel weird or guilty or something like that. So like, it's so funny. I always joke, like, it was like, I got here and thought I would find that Jewish community here. And I didn't really. So this day, most of my Jewish friends are the kids I grew up with, you know? And yes, you meet people along the way and your kids get bar mitzvah and they go to the Hebrew school and you meet some people, but not really like a ton of Hollywood Jewish friends.
So you had to accomplish this all yourself. My question is about that. Was there something in your Jewish background, upbringing culturally, that helped you in achieving your success?
I always say, you know, my great grandfather came here and sold fish on the Lower East Side. I'm just selling a different fish. You know?
Okay.
You must be a writer. I'm laughing.
We all hustle. You know what I'm saying? I think that's part, and it's also, you know, it's that work ethic. You know, I was always told, you know, by my bubby, you know, if you work hard, you know, and there is that belief in the American dream, you know, like, you know, she would say to me, it was so funny because she was born here, but her mother carried her over. Her mother was pregnant with her when she came over, and she had two older sisters. And my grandmother, as much as she was raised in America, because they only spoke Yiddish in the house and everybody had just gotten here, she felt more like a European person, because she would say things to me all the time, like, oh, you're so American, or you're, you know, and which is, again, like that really interesting thing, because they came here wanting us to have a better life. And then when we assimilated, there was a part of them that, you know, and the other thing, which I think about all the time, my grandfather was 5'5", and his name was Sonny Simon. His real name was Irving Simonovitz, and he was a boxer. And I'm 5'10" and a half, and my son is 6'2". It just goes to show you nutrition, like, you know, yes, obviously genetic, I'm mixing, you know, genes and stuff like that, but like to go from that to that 7 inches in like what, you know, 3-4 generations, that's huge. But that's the other thing my bubby would say. You're so healthy, you're so this and so that. Last bubby story really quick, not truly, I'll probably tell 5 more, but here's a little tiny thing again, like, and I'm sorry, because you just got my floods of my memories coming. So my daughter was born, her name's Josephine. She's named after my grandfather, Joseph. And my bubby was still alive, and she came to visit us, and she kept telling my wife, you love the baby too much. And my wife, after she died, says to her sister, my aunt, why does she keep saying that? And she said, because back then, especially in Russia, the odds were your child might die.
I knew it was as soon as you started that story, what the punchline.
Yeah, it was like, wow. Like, again, it didn't take that. And then that's only a generation or two, you know, that they had to think that way. It was like, love the baby only so much because you don't want to get too attached. The baby might die. And she still held that. Like, you know, my wife jokes at me all the time. She goes, the Cossacks aren't coming. I said, the Cossacks are always coming. Like,
yes,
you just never know.
Exactly.
Hope for the best, plan for the worst.
And that's what this show is trying to say. Let's not wait till they're at the door. Let's do something. Let's speak up, which is why we're so grateful for you. And to kind of, you know, we can speak forever talking to you, but I think we should get on to a couple of, I just want to know what your hope was, the most important thing that the viewers of the show would come away with, like the one thing you hope they would learn.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. I mean, obviously there's a lot of things, like, it sounds crazy, but like, even I remember, and Aura was the one who found some of the statistics. And when we put it in.
Oh, I like that when you put the statistics into the episode. Go ahead.
Yeah, but when they went in, I remember even our executives going, that can't be right. Like, they thought we messed up the numbers. They thought it was too high. And we literally had to show them the numbers that this
of anti-Semitic incidents, right? Just to clarify for our listeners.
Yes, and I forget what the number was, but it was like 146% had gone up, some crazy number. So, you know, it's the little things too, like saying like Taylor Swift has more social media and there are Jews in the world.
Yeah, that was a line everyone in the episode, and it was like, you know, it hits you right here.
Because again, we live in a place where, you know, you can go online and people do this. I remember being at a friend family event, and they asked me to work the camera. And it was a very nice group of people. It was up in Oregon, and they were all born again Christians. And they knew I was Jewish. So of course they would just always had to comment on it. So I just started to have fun with the camera, and I started to ask how many Jews are in the world. And they would literally be like, just to preference, there's about 7-8 billion people in the world. And they'd be like, well, at least half the world's Jewish. They, you know, people would believe 4 billion people, 1 billion people. Like, you know, you can go online and see all these things that when you tell people there are only 14.5 to 15 million Jews in the world, they don't believe you. They literally think you're lying. And then again, it's amazing that this small group of people both have accomplished so much and are being blamed for so much.
And that's what you wanted to get across.
Yeah.
What was the reaction of the cast, and what was the reaction of the fans to this episode? Of the cast when they read it, and of the fans when they saw the episode, watched it?
Well, I'll even throw in another thing. So the cast, again, really supportive, really amazing. So many people in the cast learned a lot, had no idea, you know, like they were very supportive, but they also would come and say, I had no idea, like, or thank you, you know, which was great. What the most touching thing that happened was while shooting the episode, and people, like, I try to know everybody on the crew, you know, and it's a big crew. I'm guessing we have close to 200 people on a crew and we're shooting. There's a lot of people. How many people walked up to me, some that I didn't even know were Jewish, and just said, thank you for doing this. You know, that was probably the most powerful to me.
That's great. Yeah.
And how many people did this, never showed it, and then would put their star
Really?
and show it to me. And
showed their Star of David to you.
Yes.
Wow.
And, you know, wanted to show it to me. Again, I can go off of like, I'm sorry, as I bring it up, I can go off in a million different directions, but I still remember, I've always worn my Star of David proudly. And I was actually putting down my garbage cans. I live in the Hollywood Hills. And I remember my neighbor, who's Jewish, who's a film and TV guy, saying to me, aren't you scared of wearing that out? And I said, I can't, I'm never going to hide who I am. I just can't. And he's like, no, I get it. Now, I will also say, he looks like, if you looked up a Jewish person in the dictionary, there'd be a photo of my neighbor. Where I pass, people, if I didn't tell people, most people don't think I'm Jewish. So they get to know me, then like, you're so Jewish. But I think, but so then you get into and so I'm jumping all over the place. The fans, I think, there was so many beautiful articles written about it. There was so much, I remember going on Twitter when it was happening and so many people responding positively. It really had an amazing impact. Adam and I both were asked to go do a panel at NBC Universal, which we did, which was absolutely amazing. Like, yes, like the feedback was really, really great. And again, you just hope that, you can reach, as many people as possible. But as the old saying goes, if you just even reach one, isn't it worth it?
Yeah, we agree with that. So that's great to hear that the reactions were really positive. People learned something. We're happy to learn about the phenomenon of anti-Semitism, better understand it. That's all great to hear. So for our listeners today, do you have suggestions for them how they could encourage their favorite scripted TV show to feature confronting anti-Semitism?
Yeah, it's interesting. We live in such a social media world. So, people are constantly reading and seeing what's online. So, Twitter, Instagram, whatever, if it's something that's important to you, you go out there and you should sort of let people know on your favorite show that it's something, you want to do. And listen, for us, it really helped, when we figured out the Adam Goldberg thing that, because the first thing that came up in the room was, even though Adam himself is Jewish, the character's Armenian. which again, we added that joke.
Yes.
That, two people, coming from two cultures that both had Holocaust, but I remember sitting with Adam, and I'll never forget, we were outside, me, him, and Lisa Lapisa, and we were talking out on the street. And I said, well, what if your mom was Jewish? And your dad was, and he's like, oh, and for him, that sort of helped him a lot, sort of connect to it. And it was and then the minute I said that, I was like, oh, what if he doesn't have a relationship with his mother? He didn't grow up with his mother. It started to sort of do this ripple effect for me. And then what if the episode becomes about, while he's learning about he's learning about his mother, and then that sort of brings him back into the community, and you start to sort of see the story. Anytime you can find a real human connection, especially with your main cast, to a storyline, it's going to make it better. So to your point, some stories, some shows might not have that entry point, that makes it as natural. Doesn't mean you can't do it. But, it's one of those storylines that for us really worked well.
I see. Okay, so let your, on social media, let the show know that you would be interested in that as a fan of the show, that you would be interested in adding, the aspect of anti-Semitism to the storyline, right?
Yes.
And now we've come almost to the end of the show, where we give our guests a chance for last thoughts. And I know Adam has lots and lots, but he's going to have to choose which ones he wants to share.
I know. I'm trying to think. It was so funny when I was talking to you earlier. I totally forgot to, we were saying where I can pass. I had the last story, and then I'll think about what I want to say is, when I was a kid, I worked the Catskill Mountains. I saw the end of that too, and I literally worked right up to I went to college in '86, and that's when they all closed. So I spent 5 years working at Grossinger's, and then also at the Stevensville Hotel in Swan Lake, New York. And because I had blonde hair, blue eyes, I would be the Shabbos goy. They would have me go in and shut off all the lights and do all that stuff because they had no one else there. They're like, Adam passes. They're like, come on. They'd call me like Adam McGlass, and they would have me, go around and do all that stuff. But I think final thoughts are, and it goes back to something I said earlier, which I think is really mostly, if you have a platform, and we all have a platform, we can all go on social media tomorrow. We can all turn around and talk to friends and family. We as Jews, and I have no problem with the word Jews, but some people I know do, we as a Jewish people, we have to stand up for ourselves. We have to fight for ourselves. We have to turn around and not be quiet and not sit back. And like the title of your show and the title, thing, I take never again very seriously. And, for my future, for not just my people, but my family, my familial line, I think we have to constantly fight back. And, like we said, we're a big divided group of people. And I hope at the end of the day, everyone realizes that, as we said, and don't want to live with constant sort of fear, but, you see what's happening, you see what's boiling up, you see what's happening also internationally. It's scary. I feel like we learned nothing, from the Holocaust, and here we are, and we're looking at a lot of the same issues. And if you don't see that as a Jewish person, no matter where you stand politically, no matter how you feel about Israel, no matter anything like that, we have to stand up, and we have to fight for ourselves, because I don't know if anyone else is going to.
Adam, those are such important last words or last thoughts. And thank you so much for sharing with us your beliefs and your enthusiasm and your call to action for all of us to speak up and use our platforms the way that you did. We thank our listeners for listening, and we hope they'll share this interview with a lot of other people, that we can get more people to speak up. If you haven't yet watched Evelyn's documentary, Never Again Is Now, you can see it on Amazon and YouTube. You can learn more about my nonfiction Holocaust play at thinedgeofthewedge.com. And as we end every show, we say, please, without putting yourself in physical harm, whenever you can, speak up against anti-Semitism and all hate.